Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost, and it's Friday. It's February 7th, and this is our TRU Community Gathering. For those of you out there who don't know us and are just sort of stumbling upon us, we're an arts organization in New York that we focus on helping people understand and navigate the business of theater. Particular focus on producers, but producers also includes self-producers, writers and actors and directors and all sorts of people who decide that they don't want to keep sitting around waiting to be produced and make things happen for themselves. So we're here to basically help you understand how to produce. We also do other programs that help writers and actors in other ways. We do a lot. I've been doing this a lot too. This community gathering has been every week since April 17th, 2020. If I'm not mistaken, this is the 249th or possibly the 250th consecutive week that I've been doing these. So we've been talking a lot about theater over the past 4.5, almost 5 years, and every aspect you can imagine: producing, acting, writing, arts management, marketing. We've done a bunch of interviews with theaters outside of New York, just to remind myself and the community that theater does happen outside of New York. And today, basically, I'm going to be talking about somebody's typing, and please don't.
Um,
It could be teeth chattering.
Oh,
I'm
teeth
getting
chattering.
nervous,
Okay.
yes.
So anyway, I stopped that chattering noise for everybody, and I was just about to say that today we're going to talk to two friends of mine who are writers who've had some successes off Broadway. We're going to talk about what it's normally like to be a writer of musical theater in this business. Um,
Is there anything normal
I
about
was
it?
going to say, I'm not sure what is normal about it. No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there is anything normal about it. But I want to just talk about what the experience is of trying to craft a career in theater from all the bits and pieces of opportunity that come our way. Um, so I'm going to actually uh, bring on my guests. They're both named Michael, so I hope you find it confusing. Um,
We'll do our
Michael,
best.
will do our best to confuse and confound you. Um, so I'm going to bring on Michael Colby.
Okay. So should I start talking or wait till
No, no,
my...
no. I have to get the right thing. There it goes.
All
Now you're
right.
there.
Well, I
And
just realized I'm feeling ancient because I looked in a book I wrote called The Algonquin Kid and realized I've been working in professional musical theater now for half a century. And I started at the first musical theater company, nonprofit exclusively for developing musicals. And that was,
we're gonna get to all that in a second. I'm gonna
okay,
actually that's going to
who
be part
am
of
I? Okay, I am a musical theater writer. I am also a book writer. I'm also right now the vice president of Urban Stages due to six different shows I've written for their winter rhythm series that have all been well received. And the latest one, Holiday Regards, is going to probably be nominated for a Mac Award as Best Review.
Well, congratulations on that. I've also brought on Michael Roberts. Michael, you say hello, and I'm also going to bring myself onto the screen
all right.
so that the three of us are visible to our viewers. So, Michael Roberts, tell us a little bit about you, and how do you differ from Michael Colby?
I don't know. A
Well,
lot
you
of
should
people.
hear my piano playing and you'd know.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm Michael Roberts, and thank you for having me, Bob. This is going to be a real fun hour for us. Uh, I am a composer, lyricist, and sometimes book writer. I've had four off-Broadway musicals. I have seven productions of four, if I'm going to brag.
Okay,
And
I'm good to join the shame line. Yes, I've done book music and lyrics also.
yeah.
Michael Colby, have you ever done book
Trio,
music?
when shall we three meet again? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the situation, whether I do all of it or some of it. I always do at least music and lyrics. I'm music director. I was the former president of the American Songbook Association, but that's the bulk of it as far as what's important to us.
Because we're gonna go back to the history of these two guys because both of them have interesting histories, and then we're gonna move our way forward into the career that eventually evolved. Michael,
Colby, cheese,
Michael
MC will
Colby,
do. Yes.
Michael Colby.
Uh-huh.
Tell us about your upbringing because you have a very specific
Okay.
story, and it certainly explains why you went into theater.
Well, not quite, because I have framed my pre-kindergarten report card before I even knew what the Algonquin meant. And in that report card, it says Michael likes to dress up, tell stories, and put on plays. So I had the right family. My grandparents, the Bodneys, from 1946 to 1987, owned the Algonquin Hotel, and I am a real life counterpart to Eloise. My middle name is even Eliu. So I was surrounded by a lot of history. I saw people going up, I saw people going down. I grew up knowing people like Thornton Wilder. I was very close to Mary Chase, who wrote Harvey, and Dale Wasserman, who wrote Man of La Mancha. And going full circle, I ended up collaborating with them on musicals. And I just, you'll have to read the Algonquin Kid to hear about my history there. But I'd rather focus on the theater because I have been a founding member of the Stuart Ostrow Musical Theater Lab at St. Clements, which was the first nonprofit organization to develop musicals. Our first show in 1974 was The Robber Bridegroom when Alfred Urry was about to throw in the towel because he couldn't get any work. And his one Broadway credit, Here's Where I Belong, which he shared with Terrence McNally, lasted one performance. And
I
this,
saw that.
yeah.
I actually saw it. Heather
So
McRae.
yes, yes, and Nancy Wickwire and many others. But uh, so he was about to give up, and he happened to have the same agent as Stephen Sondheim, Flora Roberts. And when Stuart Ostrow, who was at that time almost as important as Harold Prince, he produced 1776 and Pippin and The Apple Tree. And on the profits of those shows, he founded this musical theater lab at St. Clements originally. And they fished this musical, The Robber Bridegroom, out of a trash can. And that was our opening show there. And I shared the office space there. And Alfred came and he used my typewriter to do rewrites on The Robber Bridegroom when we still had electric typewriters. And I saw musicals being made for the first time. And the original leading man was Raul Julia. We had people like Victor Garber working there, and the show was done for a shoestring. And in those days, you could do these shows for a couple of $1,000s, and the actors were happy to be part of this creative process. And it was exhilarating. And that's, I mean, I have my BA in English from Northwestern, my MA in drama from NYU, but where I really learned the ropes was at the Musical Theater Lab, the hands-on experiences. And I volunteered to work in any theater that would take me in those days.
So let me ask you this: when you were putting on shows when you were like a kid, was that your goal? Did you want to be a writer? Did you know what you wanted to do yet?
Oh, I always knew I wanted to be a lyricist. I always knew that I had a way with words. And even when I was in school and we had poetry projects, everyone wanted to collaborate with me on it.
When I was 4 years old, I started writing rhymed couplets.
Yes,
So
me too, me too. And never doggerel, always rhymed. But I also, because of the Algonquin, I was exposed to the golden age of musicals. The greatest performance I ever saw in a musical was Ethel Merman, the original, and Gypsy. And I got to see all those things. And I would say that the process of that I absorbed a lot of greatness just attending that wonderful period in musical theater. And I became a sort of a scholar of lyrics. I was the I ended up being the researcher for Thou Swell Thou Woody, Dorothy Hart's biography of her brother-in-law, Lorenz Hart. And so I became a protege of the Hart family. And this was all before Sondheim really came on the scene. And my heroes were people like Sheldon Harnick and E.Y. Harburg and Lorenz Hart and Oscar Hammerstein and Frank Lesser. And some of those people I even got to meet. Lerner Lowe wrote both My Fair Lady and Camelot at the Algonquin. And we have stories about how they would work in the suite below my grandparents on My Fair Lady. And in the middle of the night, my grandfather complained about all the noise on the floor below him. And he called the operator and he said, "Could you tell them to stop? I wouldn't mind if it was something good." And what they were writing was, "I could have danced all night."
Mary Martin would have agreed with you. I'm gonna bring
boys have lost their cut.
Yeah, really. I'm gonna bring on Michael Roberts. Michael, it's the same question to you. Tell us a little about your celebrated start. You were just all celebrities were all over you. You were working with people that are just very well known today.
Yeah, not in a creepy way. Yeah,
not in a creepy way. Yeah.
Right, okay.
And the other question I have is this before you started writing, or were you already writing?
Somewhere around me in a creepy way, but that's another story.
No, I started initially. I started pre-law. I switched to music halfway through, although I've been playing piano since I was 7. Grew up on Long Island.
Me too.
All right.
I grew up in the 5 towns.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yeah. Woodmere, right? Anyway.
Anyway, go on.
Anyway, so I grew up in a town called Dix Hills, and I think every school has one piano player who plays all the shows and the talent shows and all that. And I got into music early on, classical, jazz, and rock. My brother played cast albums all the time. He loved theater. And I actually didn't. I know it's a kind of horrible thing to say. But slowly, there would be exceptions. We, for instance, 1776, which someone mentioned earlier, is we always, I'm like, yeah, I hate musicals, but I like that one. Then I heard Company, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of clever. And so it was always in the back of my head. I went to study classical music and got a master's. Excuse me, a master's in that. Came back to New York. I'm trying to do this in one breath. And didn't know what to do, so I got a normal job. And I started playing keys in the independent band scene in the late 80s in New York. CBGBs, all this. Not necessarily red meat for this audience, but that's what I did. And then I slowly got recording sessions because I know how to play rock and jazz. And of course, from conservatory, you know how to read well and transpose and all that business. And as far as songwriting goes, I became a lyricist just because I didn't know a lyricist. This is in graduate school. I started writing. And I worked at any kind of music job there was. I really wanted initially to write pop songs. The way they used to be written, I think Michael C. was referring to this, of some kind of sophistication and some roughly erudite and all that. And by the time I got back to New York and started looking into that, I think like the big songs were Who Let the Dogs Out and things like that. And I realized that pop music writing is really not my thing. So, oh my God, this is long. I'll make it short. So, fortunately, as a keyboard player, my career took off, and I started touring with a lot of big acts from this, older acts from the 60s and 70s. I was in Herman's Hermits.
I want to hear about that. I want to hear about that.
I
Well,
love Hermits.
I love Herman Hermits and I love Pete. I miss Peter.
Did you see Henry VIII? I mean,
I sat. No, Pete did, but I did. He go Henry. I go Henry. We'd have to do that. We all did that. I did sing. Harmony background. You know, background
I
vocals.
won copies of Mrs. Brown by identifying on the radio.
Oh, really? He still has an enormous fan base. It's been many, many years since I've done that kind of work. But I was Leslie Gore's music director. I music directed and wrote arrangements for the great Christie, who's still a dear friend. Anyway, so I did that. And then I got married and I wanted to get off the road. And so I didn't know what else to do. So I got into musical theater just as work. And I really started liking it. I did one season of summer stock where we did Forum. A funny thing happened with Forum. And I couldn't believe that lyrics could be so good. I could not believe that lyrics could be that good.
And it didn't get a Tony nomination.
Yeah, look, I think the theme of this industry is life's not fair. Yeah, life's not fair. Anyway, so things like that, and then I heard Robert Ginslow's orchestrations to Bye Bye Birdie when I was music directing that, and that got me really excited as a musician to hear these players and arrangers working at such a high level, and that's what I wanted to do. There's a lot more to it, but I feel like I'm bogging this conversation.
No, you're doing what I'm hoping you were doing. I want to hear. I wanted to hear about that. I wanted to hear about Leslie Gore. I wanted to hear about Herman.
Leslie's great. I didn't get to be her MD for very long. She wasn't well. She wasn't. By that time, she wasn't feeling well. But
there's a Christopher Gore theater connection with her too, isn't there?
Not Christopher Gore, the one who maybe so, but her brother wrote Fame.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, Michael Gore.
Michael Gore, right.
Right. You should have him on, Bob, with us. Another Michael.
Actually, I'd love to get Dean Pitchford. He was an old friend of mine.
That's cool.
I was with him at the Rocking Horse restaurant having brunch with him when he was telling me that he's feeling so weird because they're calling him out to New York. He has to leave to California. He has to leave New York to go to California, and he's writing something like Fame or something. He wasn't sure, and he just felt like he was just selling out.
When I was at the musical theater lab, people like him and Kevin Kline would audition for the shows. They both would audition for the Robert Bridegroom. Kevin Kline was originally turned down for being too stiff, and then he did it at the Actors Company anyway. So, yeah,
my goodness.
I mean, the people I saw at the beginning of their careers, like Faith Prince and Vicki Clark, and one of the Kristen Chenoweth got her equity card doing a show that I helped write. So it just.
And what was that show? What was that show?
It was a production of Animal Crackers. It was done at a Goodspeed and Paper Mill, and they needed an extra song because. The original score was by Ruby Kalmer and Ruby, and there's spinster characters who don't have a song. And so Charlie Repoli, who was directing it, called me, Michael, we need a song for these characters. And so I wrote it overnight. I often get calls to do these things overnight, and nobody knew that it wasn't written for the original show.
So let's pull this into a more of a shape right now. So what I want to know from both of you is how long did it take for you to feel that you could actually be a writer of musical theater, and when did you have your first show up, and how did that change you, if it did? So Michael Roberts.
Okay. After this kind of picks up my story. So I wanted to, after being a music director in New York and all that, I wanted to write again. And my brother happened to know Rupert Holmes, and he introduced us. And we got to know each other.
Boy, it doesn't hurt to know people, does it?
No, it doesn't. But he's just the most important person in my career. He's a dear friend still, and. What happened, I'll tell you the story very quickly. Rupert had an assistant, and just an assistant, a secretarial assistant, but a wonderful musician too. And she got married and left. I heard about this, and I wrote a letter to Rupert saying, hey, remember, I'm the guy my brother introduced us to, and I said, if you need an assistant, I would totally love to do that. And so we talked on the phone. He's like, aren't you a guy who just plays on the road all the time? I'm like, not anymore. I'm in this now. And he said, come up and meet me. So we chatted. And I was assistant for a little while. And I don't know if he'll tell the story this way, but I'm going to tell it this way because it's true. You know, he's going to be overly nice about it. I was the worst assistant anyone has ever had in any industry. I am not a secretarial person, but I thought I could be. Anyway, so Rupert said, listen, you're pretty terrible, but you're a good musician, of course. Let's work together one day as a musician. I know you've played for so-and-so and so-and-so. And I figured that was just a really nice way to get rid of me, a very, very kind and polite way to get rid of me. Anyway, one of the things I was secretarying at the time was a TV show for AMC that Rupert was creating called Remember When. It was a sitcom. It was the first original show on AMC. And Rupert was the creator and the head writer. And almost
a lot of future Broadway stars, too.
Absolutely. Anyway, so, yeah, absolutely. Michael's right. Anyway, so long story short, a month or so later, Rupert calls. He says, put on AMC, the pilot's on. And so I put the TV on. I'm dying to see this, And the first person comes on, and in a pilot, as you probably know, a lot of information, a lot of expository stuff gets done. And people say their names, their full names a lot, and where they live. Pilots are like that. Anyway, so the first actress walks on. She says, hi, my name is Betty Roberts. And I'm floored because, it's my last name. And so I called Rupert after the show. And I said, I don't know if you did that anyway or whatever, but I'm immortal. Thank you, man. And and then he said, do you want to be a writer on the show? Do you want to, not a script writer? Do you want to be a composer on the show? And I freaking floored. And I did that for 3 of the 4 seasons. I've been in a couple episodes because my other job was to go onto the soundstage and show who was in the cast then, Carolee Carmello and Mary Stout and whoever else. And sometimes the guest stars we had, how to play whatever instrument they're supposed to play. Although those guys are so amazing, nobody needs my help. Anyway, but I was in the Christmas episode, I was in this other episode. Anyway, so that is how I got into television. And when the show went off the air, I wanted very much, and still do, want to be like Rupert. I went into theater big.
Well, what I'm sort of trying to drive at is, I know that you helped raise money for your shows. I want to get to the point where you guys started writing shows, and did it seem hopeless? Did it seem inspiring? I mean, I know I've lived this frustrating career myself.
Not in those days. Not in those days. There was a lot more activity and a lot more opportunity when I started.
Didn't happen to me, but good for you. So tell me about it. Tell me about what happened.
Well, I just mean there were places like the Musical Theater Lab, the Stuart Ostrom Musical Theater Lab, where you could do a show for several $1,000s. And that helped launch me so that my first couple of musicals, I went from, I had offers, and it was always an odyssey from show to show. Like I always knew I could, that this was my special talent. And word got out, and the 13th Street Theater was doing a spoof of Rodgers and Hammerstein, and it needed to be overhauled. So they called me in, and I wrote North Atlantic that way. And they were supposed to do it, and then the author and the artistic, one of the artistic directors had a falling out. So I took it on my own shoulders and got it produced. And I've been called in to overhaul show after show. And
well, this gets to the heart of it. I mean, I have a room full of writers. Not everybody is a writer, but a lot of them, including myself, have always been frustrated at how difficult it is to see our work up on stage.
Yeah.
So tell me, what do you mean by you got it produced?
Well, I have to say I was very lucky. Part of it was through my family and raising money through a foundation they had. Through the years, I've done things like trade in my very valuable comic collection to finance a show. I was in a terrible car accident. I used that money to finance a show.
So it would be fair to say that you've been a self-producer. a self-producing
Not
artist?
well, not always. When Goodspeed opened their theater in Chester exclusively for musicals, in their first season, of the four shows they chose, three of them were financed outside of Goodspeed, and my musical version of Mrs. McThing was the one original show that they picked up. And so I've had shows picked up, but I must say I ended up in the hospital because of how things went there. So
Well,
that's
how
that's a saga in
the
itself. Yeah.
the stress of it?
Well,
An
let's
argument with the director? I mean, what happened?
no. Well, it's more complex than that. I've had a lot
Okay.
of let's say Sisyphean experiences. When I because when no one would do the first show I did of significance besides North Atlantic that got produced was my Christmas show, Ludlow Lad. There was a company called the Lyric Theater of New York off-Broadway. And they asked me if I had done a reading with Maria Karnilova and Karen Mignini and Ross Petty of a show. And it was very inexpensive to do it. And
I know Ross Petty.
yeah, well, we all know each other.
He was in a show of mine. He was in my only off-Broadway show.
And Igor's Gavin, if you know your Hello Dolly cast.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that went very well, and it was a dream come true because I always adored Maria Karnilova, and suddenly we were the Mutual Admiration Society. Maria Karnilova as the original
Tessitura.
and Tessitura, but of all her performances, her taunts in Zorba was in a class by itself, and I'd been in
No
love.
boom boom.
Yes, and love only love, and anyway, so here I am working with Maria Karnilova. It's a dream come true. The reading went very well. They asked me if I had a Christmas show. They wanted to do a Christmas show, and I said, well, look, I'm a Southern Jew. We celebrated everything. And so I wrote a first draft in 12 days, and it was Ludlow Lad, and it was entirely rhymed, entirely sung. So it was technically an opera and didn't have to be. And I had the actors carrying around their books like Christmas carolers. So it was an ongoing Christmas carol. Necessity is quite a mother. And we had like the most elaborate reading you've ever heard of. And it was so well received, I decided to write a sequel to that, and it was Charlotte's Suite. And nobody was interested in Charlotte's Suite. And
So so we're gonna stop there because Charlotte Street is
that's
Suite is
what's in
the
back of me. That's what's in back of me.
yeah that's going to be the next step. Michael, what was it that led you to finally get your shows produced? And you wrote to me and said that you've raised about $1 million for the productions of your show.
Yeah.
Shows. So
Yeah.
let everybody know how you do that.
Okay, I'll answer the first question first and then the second question. The first question, how did I finally get something up? As a music director and a pianist, I worked, and I worked at the John Houseman and at the Fairbanks, which Eric Krebs, who I know has been a guest on your show, he owns, and I was playing. Can't remember the show for him, and he came backstage once and he said, "Hey, Michael, do you want to write a show about golf?" And I said, "Yeah, all right." And he says, "I'll pay you to write a show about golf." And I'm like, okay. He's never heard a song of mine or anything, but that's Eric. He's one of the great independent mercurial producers.
He's been incredible to me too. I just want to say I love Eric.
He's one of my favorite people. And so I wrote the show Golf the Musical, and it ran for a long time, and it's been revived off Broadway twice. It's kind of played all around the world and all over the country, and so sometimes you get up to bat and you get a hit the first time at bat.
So you actually had the advantage of having a producer on board who asked you to write the show. So you weren't sitting around with a show in your upper drawer, your top drawer, waiting for somebody to take notice of it.
Not
So
really. No.
was that your first show that you wrote?
Yeah, I had written some other stuff, but I didn't actively try to get it out there because I don't want to get my first show out there. It's probably not any good. Yeah, so the first show proper was when Eric commissioned Golf. To answer the other question, which might be more interesting maybe to people out in the audience who are either thinking of self-producing or looking for producers. What happened after that is from that, I got an agent. It's a very normal thing. And one of the other people represented by that agent called me and said, hey, I have an idea for a show. Would you be interested? And I said, well, let's meet. Anyway, so the show was about Joseph Pujol, who was a very famous performer in Paris around the turn of the previous century. He was a flatulent artist. He farted. There's no other nice way to say it. Anyway, so we did that, and we took it to the New York Fringe, and they said it's really great. You could do it. You should probably raise 30 or 40,000 to put it up because that's what a festival costs. It's a big show. And so Charlie and I Charlie Shulman who wrote the book, I'm sorry, and raised this money with me. Charlie Shulman and I just started asking people for money. There's no other way around it. We just asked people for money. And we put in our own money.
So let me tell you what I hear from people all the time. I don't know anybody who has money. I can't ask for money because nobody I know has money. What would you tell these people?
Meet people who have money.
There you go.
It's not hard where
it's actually what I tell them is that you don't know that. You don't know that you don't know anybody with money.
That's true too.
Until you have the conversations, you really don't know what anybody can or can't do.
Right.
Also find ways to do things on a shoestring. I mean, what's been wonderful when I've been at Urban Stages is I've done a series of benefit, and it becomes a tax write-off to do a benefit. And the shows I've done there, one was recorded by J Records. One led to a regional production. If you are good to your performers, it's astonishing the caliber of people who will do your show. And by the way, we have a lot of leading men in common, Michael. Joel Blum and Kevin Kraft both did my shows.
What can I say? They're the greatest.
Yeah. Michael Ard, am I remember correctly? Wasn't Sal Viviano in Golf?
Sal Viviano and Joel Blum were in the first production of Golf. Yes. Yeah. Joel got a Drama Desk nomination for that. I was very proud of him. Very happy.
Great. Yeah. I love Sal and Liz. They're
great,
friends.
Man. What a sound! What a voice! I love my cast. They were great. Yeah.
So, Owen, I just want to remind you and everybody that if you have any comments or questions that you want to ask, put them into the chat. I think Owen mentioned earlier that he's the person that will find the questions and ask them. It makes it easier for him if you put a cue first. Owen, has anybody asked a question during our conversation?
I'm sure they've been so fascinated with all of the stories you two have been telling that they've not had any time.
We could go on and on.
The thing that I'm interested in is the difficulty so many of us have as writers to make anything, to make the jello stick to the wall. I mean,
it goes beyond that. You also have to be a series of lucky breaks if you do get the show on. Like when I did Charlotte Sweet, it was hailed as the next Fantastics. And we lived in the shadow of another show. We even had the same publicist. Little Shop of Horrors was back to back, and the same publicist covered us both. And they got picked up by the Schuberts and Cameron McIntosh, and he didn't want us to get the same publicity. And so he got fired on the same day from us for not getting any publicity, Little Shop of Horrors for having the wrong phone number of the box office in New York Magazine. What's that? Oh, that must be the ghosts of people who don't want that don't want this.
Yeah, I was shaking. No,
yeah.
Everybody's got their audio off. Okay.
Yeah, it's been like Sisyphus, where I've come so close on so many occasions. When I did North Atlantic, the Rodgers and Hammerstein spoof, which was probably the first meta musical, which I don't like to use because it sounds like fiber supplement.
Remind me of Jim's last name.
Jim Frederick was a composer on
Jim
that.
Frederick. Yes, he was a friend of, he was also a friend of mine.
Yeah, and Variety wanted to review it, and it got great reviews. We got a show business award, and we had Lori Tan Chin, who went on to play Bloody Mary opposite Glenn Close in South Pacific. It was the introduction of the non-equity Susan Bigelow, who went on to play South Pacific Everywhere and was the original I'm going to wash that gray right out of my hair. And she got Goodspeed right out of doing North Atlantic. And Ludlow Lad was a finalist for Circle in the Square. It was between that and Robert Klein for their Christmas slot. And it went to Robert Klein. And Mrs. McThing, we beat out all the competition. The first review said we were going to be the next Annie. And Michael Price, the artistic director, fired our leading lady, who was a favorite leading lady of Variety, who creamed us. And that was the end of that show. And you just go through it. But, you know, I've had so many glorious experiences with these shows. Like when Charlotte Sweet was done, I had fans like Al Hirschfeld. I got a fan letter from Leonard Cohen. And when I did a show for TADA, I was a founding member of TADA, the off-Broadway children's theater. It was about adoptees as seen through the eyes of children. And we were part of National Adoption Month. And Kurt Vonnegut,
You're talking about the show that you wrote with Ned Ginsburg, right?
yes, they chose me. And Kurt Vonnegut came and saw it, and he was a fan. And, you know, when things like that happen to you, that's such an incredible reward. And
Things keep you going. I
Yeah.
know that you also have to be smart enough to recognize those moments.
to treasure those moments, exactly.
Yeah, you really
And
do
also
need to treasure
to
them.
savor the friendships and the camaraderie that develops on these shows.
So Michael Roberts, you had the Michael Roberts, you had the luck of being found by Eric Krebs. He came to you, and this does everybody. This doesn't happen to all of us. It doesn't really. So your producer found you. After that, has there been any need for you to find a producer? And somebody in the room is asking, how do you find a producer? Owen, can you tell me if that's more complicated than that, what the question was?
Networking makes a big difference, number one, but
Oh,
also
Heather.
getting the show up. There are very few people who are going to take it unless they've heard samples of your work, whether it's just individual songs or a showcase or a reading of one of the shows that you've written. That's the only. I've been called in to take over on Meester Amerika, which won the TRU Award. I was called in to take over the lyrics on that. I was called in to take over the lyrics on Dangerous. Larry Hochman, the orchestrator, loves my work, and he recommended me after he saw a reading of Dangerous. I was called in on North Atlantic, and I will only do these shows if there's a guarantee that something's going to happen with them.
Michael Roberts, how about you?
Yeah.
Has anybody besides Eric produced your work?
It's a long. It's hard to answer that question very specifically, but I'll explain really quickly what happened after, and I'll kind of answer the question that way. After golf did well, and Charlie Shulman and I started on the Fartiste. We took it to the Fringe. We raised the 35-40, whatever it was, and it won Best Musical or whatever the name of the award was. And so we attracted a producer for that. And the producer took out an option, and I don't know if I'm speaking over some people's heads or not, but an option is an initial payment that a producer will give you for the exclusive rights to produce the show, very often for 1 year. They also have the right to renew that option if they give you another, for off-Broadway, say $5,000. After that, it's your choice whether you want to take the product back, the property back or not, if they haven't produced it in that amount of time. So we had a producer. That producer gave us, Charlie and me, an advance. They took out an exclusive on it. They never produced it. So then it was 2 years after the Fringe, and all the buzz had worn off, and Charlie and I were sitting here with a show that we knew was kind of good. And so we just looked at each other and we said, I wonder how much it costs to do this. We had meetings with general managers who are the fulcrum, the very center of what it means to do commercial theater, at least in New York. And they told us, and we blanched at the number. And then next day we just started having cocktail parties, and I sang the songs from the show an awful lot. So for that one, we were producers, but we gathered other producers with us. What helped a great deal was the fact that Charlie and I had the seed money. Very few people want to be first money in, because as I think most of the people in this digital room know, very few shows make it all the way. And so what happens to that money is nothing. Anyway, so then after that, that got up off-Broadway and died in London. Didn't even open in London. It's a long story.
It didn't open.
It didn't open. We don't know why. I mean, I have no idea why. Really, honestly, I'm not being cagey. I don't know why. Anyway, so then when I got back, I don't know how much later, Eric called and he wanted me to write a show about all the different aspects of greed, avarice and all that. And I'm like, wow, okay, my last show kind of did off-Broadway, but then died. I love Eric. I love to work with Eric.
Let me ask you something, just to clarify something. Was golf, did golf have a book, a story, or was it just about golf? And this Fartiste, I know, did have a storyline.
It's a book musical. Yeah, golf is not a book musical. It's a series of skits and songs. So yeah.
I guess that was sort of "I Love You, You're Perfect" change with the influence for that whole genre.
That was the time, right? That was when everybody was doing them, right? And
when you have a chance, I want to bring up another important point of how to keep a show alive, but whenever the time is right.
Okay, in a moment. So what I wanted to say, greed, again, Eric approached you and said, write a show about greed. Did it become a series of scenes, or did it become a story with a dramatic arc? What did you do?
It was very much in the model of golf, because that's what had worked for us in the past. So unfortunately, this wasn't as well received. It was at New World Stages, and I thought it was good, but of course I think it's good. But it didn't play very long there. But
not playing very long doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't good. So just clarify that. Absolutely.
And it doesn't mean that it won't have a life afterwards if you get the right licensing and luck and all that. But for Fartiste, when we did it off Broadway, Charlie and I were lead producers. We formed an LLC, that's a limited liability company. And this is a big job to self-produce. If you talk about commercially on Broadway, off Broadway, or West End, it's the business model's complicated. So you have to be up for that.
Michael, did you say who the producer was of Charlotte's Suite? You must have, and I think it's
okay. Let me give you I think this is important also to talk about.
Okay.
I had 3 major offers when Charlotte's Suite opened. I had Ken Wasteman is a good friend of mine. I have lunch with him a lot. At that time, when we were doing the musical theater lab, he had Grease. He had Over Here. He had Torch Song Trilogy. He was the hot producer, and everyone wanted him to come and see the show at the Musical Theater Lab. He came in for Charlotte's Suite. He said it was the best showcase he ever saw and offered to do it. But he wanted to do it like Grease. He saw Grease in Chicago and did his own production, brought in his own creative team, and I would not turn my back on the people who had done such a beautiful job with my show. I had an offer from Elliot Martin, but he wasn't sure when he could get it on. And then I had a producer named Stan Rafe, who did not have the connections or the background, but who would move it right away. And it was immediately a struggle for a variety of reasons, including the fact that we had no advance. Nobody knew who we were. And Stan wanted to hand out pamphlets at the half-price booth. I went to the half-price booth every single day of our run and talked people into coming and seeing us, and we ran for months based on my going out there and talking people into seeing it. And they would come back and they would rave about it. And there was a survey at the half-price booth that listed Torch Song Trilogy and Charlotte's Suite as the favorite shows. And it looked like we were about to catch on, and we had one really bad week in Halloween. I had people on the line who said, "We hear this is the show to see. This and Cats and Little Shop of Horrors." But we had that one week, and the actors had just gotten salary hikes because we were about to break even, but the financial bottom fell out, and we had to close. And I went to the half-price line, and I saw very few people there on the line. It was Halloween weekend, and I went to the theater. We had two performances and knew that the first performance was going to be relatively empty. And I went in, I couldn't bear to see what was going on there. I went in, that smaller audience was the most receptive audience imaginable. They were screaming and hollering, and it was just one of the most emotional experiences of my life. But this is why I do it.
So the key question is, how do you know the producer is the right person for your show? And so you gave us some clear reasons
I may
why.
not have a choice. When I got
you have to always have a choice, because what I try to tell people is, writers will do anything to get produced, and I ask them not to do that. Basically, you need to know what the expectations are from the producer, and you need to know what your expectations are, because people wind up in relationships with producers all the time where they never really clarified what the ground rules were, and suddenly they feel like they've been cheated and robbed, and oh, this producer is a terrible person, and look what they did to me. Always have conversations.
But when they're really enthusiastic about the show and you want to get the show on my show Tales of Tinseltown, I had a wonderful producer.
I know her well.
Yeah, but she didn't have the creative insight. I warned her about somebody involved with the show, and my agent said, "You've got to lay off. If you keep on pushing against this person," I said, "He's wrong for it. She's gonna back out." And she had a lot of money. I found that you either get people who give you the creative freedom or who have the money. It's very hard to find the combination. But anyway, years later, she said, "Why didn't you warn me about that director?" I know I said too much. Okay.
So, Michael Roberts, let me ask you this. I started to ask you this. I don't know if I got the answer or not. Have you ever worked with a producer other than Eric Krebs?
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at with Fartiste. That Charlie and I started attracting other producers.
Marilyn Anderson. It's not Farts the musical. It's the Fartiste.
The Fartiste.
It's much classier than the Farts.
Oh yeah. It's a very classy musical. Anyway, so once Charlie and I had put together 100th Hour, so then you could go to other people and either ask them to bring in their own money or cobble together money from their people, but you have something that's already started. It shows people that you're very serious.
Let me speak for some people in the room who are going, how the hell do you put together 100th Hour?
And that's nothing compared to what it costs now.
Of course.
Oh,
So,
100,000, yeah.
It goes back to what Michael said, what Michael Roberts said earlier, which you ask.
Here's what I think the best way to put it is, and I found out this expression recently: overpaying. Everybody in this business overpays. Well, if you're going to be, even hope to be successful. It's not like a regular job where I put in this much work and I get this much, You put in this much work and the chances are that you get zero. I mean, I don't mean to be glum, but it's a fact. So that's the first part of it. You're overpaying. You have to get comfortable with that. And if you don't, maybe you should think about something else, only because there's someone sitting next to you doing the same thing who is going to overpay. So the $100,000, I worked for it. I took out from my savings because I had savings, because I knew someday I might want to do something like this. So you have to sacrifice your entire life, including your financial life, to it. That's what works for me. I don't know what else to say about it.
Ditto. I just gave you an example. I sold this precious childhood collection of comic books. I took out the money that I had gotten in a lawsuit after I was, smashed by a car. And I remember that when I was smashed by that car, I actually was on my way on another project. I wrote this musical, Slay It with Music, and Larry Gallagher had just had a huge hit with Beehive. And did I say Larry? Is it Larry Gallagher? Yeah, Larry Gallagher.
Dick Gallagher.
No, Dick Gallagher is I didn't want to confuse it with Dick.
Oh, okay.
I knew Dick Gallagher too. But Larry Gallagher had just had a huge hit with Beehive. And Slate with Music was the show he was going to take to Broadway. And so I was on the way to his agent, William Craver, when I got hit by a car and a truck. And I bounced like a ping pong ball. And the police, when they revived me.
Do you know we have that in common? I was hit by a cab.
Yeah. I ran out of a cab. Anyway, the police, when they revived me, knew I was okay, because the first thing I said was, I took out my phone and I said, "Can you call up this Asian and tell him I'm going to be late for the appointment?" And it's a blood sport. I mean, and I ended up using the money from a settlement to get that show on. And you know what? I proudly point to the scar from that accident that helped me finance the show, because every one of these shows was a wonderful experience for me and for the company.
Curious, Michael, what year was your accident?
Oh God, I'd rather suppress it.
Okay, mine was 1979. I always will remember it.
Okay, I think mine was a little bit later than that. But
okay.
So did that help finance the show for you?
Long story. It did in some ways help me with I had one off-Broadway show. Everybody's getting into the act at the Actors Playhouse. So I mean, I could actually tell my story too, but I'm more interested in yours right now. Michael Roberts, very sensitive question from Catherine Keats. Do you golf?
Not when I was commissioned to write the show, but I knew that golfers are I'm a sports fan, so I know how people treat their other sports very seriously, and I thought would be able to smell an outsider instantly. So I started taking lessons, and now, golf hasn't really played a lot of places in several years, but I still golf. Yeah, I do. I love it. I'm hooked, totally.
One of the kicks I got when I was doing the showcase of Charlotte Sweet is we were very popular with Actors Equity people, and an older woman came in and she said, "Is it," because Charlotte Sweet took place in Victorian England, and they said, "Is it true that they flew the writer all the way over from England to do this show?" And I said, "How did you ever find out?"
And she never knew it was you.
No.
Okay. Owen, you wanted to ask some of the questions from the room?
I think we've gotten most of them, but Jeffrey Fisher-Smith wants to know how easy it was to produce a show about farting.
Hey Jeff, that's a good question. Easy, I don't know. It's like giving birth through your nose to do any show. It was a crazy idea, but having won the Fringe gave it some legitimacy. I think the idea back then was that Urinetown, if I remember correctly, started at the New York Fringe, and went on to wonderful things. So we're like, well, if they'll do pee, they'll do farts, And so so we just want the scatological thing, and that's our brand.
And because of you, I had to rhyme Fartiste because I wrote when Kevin Kraft was being paid tribute to. I wrote the special tribute to him, a parody, and that was in there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Lil Ree suggests arts fey, perhaps. Instead, in Pig Latin, it sounds less offensive. So we'll see. I don't know. I think the Fartiste is still the Fartiste.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of buzz about it. I got to tell you, there was a lot of buzz about it when it was in the Fringe. And you have a very typical story of how by not being able to move quickly from a success into the next step, you can lose so much momentum.
Yeah, I think I don't want to be boastful and say we were the talk of the Fringe, but well, thank you. But 2 years later, by the time Charlie and I, Charlie again, the great Charlie Shulman, got the rights back, 2 other seasons of the Fringe had already happened, and 2 more shows became the darlings or whatever it was, and we were yesterday's paper. So
that's why I made the right move on Charlotte Sweet. There were pluses and minuses, but I kept the momentum going, and we all had a lovely time within our relatively short period.
And basically,
by
turning down Ken Weisman, you actually are still friends today. It kind of could have gone another way.
Yeah, but not more importantly, I am still every company I've ever worked with. I am the person that I'm the all points bulletin person that I'm the through line to them all. They're all my mishpachas. We just stay in touch, and we have wonderful events. And whenever I'm doing something, a charity or a benefit, if they're available, they come because they know how much we all love each other.
So this is to the room. We're going to start winding down a little bit now. So if you have any questions or comments, I think this has been a relatively realistic look at what it's like to have a career in theater for so many of us.
I have to speak about it in schools the next month.
By the way, I interviewed Joey Canis about 2 years ago, and everybody would think, oh my God, that's the most successful name I could say for off-Broadway writer. He was very humble, and he was very frustrated, and it was very hard to make things happen. He had huge impact in social media with Be More Chill, but it didn't necessarily lead to a Broadway success.
Well, even witnessing the Algonquin, I once as a kid I had cocktails with Thornton Wilder and with the nefarious Jed Harris, who was a famous director, producer, who was the director on Our Town and The Crucible, and he was a nasty man. And Thornton Wilder was like Santa Claus, and just the difference between them was so incredibly perceivable, and humility is so important, and appreciating people who are there with you in the theater.
Bob, since we're winding down, there was one thing I kind of wanted to say, because I know that a big part of what the good work that you guys do is this bridge between theater writers and theater producers and all that. And I kind of feel like I've been a little bit grim, but I'm calling it the way it actually is. But I should say something, and I was hoping I could get a chance to say this, is that artists must be entrepreneurs nowadays. There's no musical theater factory you go to where you punch a clock, you write songs, and they give you a check. That is patently unfair to artists to expect artists to also be entrepreneurs. You don't expect a great entrepreneur, a banker, whoever that, to necessarily be a good composer or whatever. But that is the fact. Back in the day, people like Michael Colby and I, we would have been writing for the king or for the emperor or for the church. That was how artists worked through the vast history of Western culture. It is now, it's in the past, say, 100 years or so, that everybody is forced to be an entrepreneur. So it's a very unfortunate thing, but I think it is here to stay.
It's not just now. It's been that way for decades. When I was on the half price booth for Charlotte Sweet, there was a budding playwright who told me, "You're on the line hawking your show. Well, I'm going to have my show done by the Phoenix Theater next month at Marymount, and I would never put myself out like that." Well, the Phoenix Theater folded the next month, and I said I was sure glad that I swallowed my pride and went out there and did everything I could for my art.
When I had my one and only off-Broadway show, everybody's getting into the act at the Actors Playhouse. I was the house manager. I changed the toilet paper.
Yeah.
I cleaned the bathroom. It's like very glamorous being an off-Broadway playwright.
I did St. Clements when I was.
But you know, I didn't mind it at all. I was just so happy to just have. I was so grateful to have my show in a real off-Broadway theater, which doesn't exist anymore. But it was a really well-known theater back then. Of course, I was smeared by John Simon. But that's another story.
John was a friend of mine, but that's
I didn't know he had any friends. I'm surprised.
No. One of the shows his wife, Pat, he mellowed when he married her. We wrote an autobiographical show. I wrote an autobiographical show with her about the Prozac generation. And a character based on John Simon was depicted on stage as Hitler. And he came and he laughed. And he couldn't have been more supportive. And in his later years, he was a curmudgeon for years. But after Pat, he did change. He was much more supportive than he was in the old days.
Well, I was put at a table with him at the party after the what's it called? The Broadway World Awards? No,
the Theater World Awards.
Theater World Awards. The Theater World. And he sat there looking in his martini the entire time. And I actually told him, I said, "You actually smeared me to pieces in a review."
Well,
and
Sylvia Miles, it was famous story that Sylvia Miles, the actress, was called a gate crasher in one of his reviews, that she was famous for being a gate crasher. And she was at Sardi's and she saw him there, and I think she picked up her plate of spaghetti and she threw it, she dumped it on him, and she said, "Now you can call me a plate crasher too."
Good. He was not fun to be at a table with, I have to say.
Yeah.
So I think we can wrap it up a little. I'm looking to see if anybody else had anything. Oh, Joanna. Joanna says that back then there were such a thing as patrons. Eric was kind of your patron, Michael Roberts.
I don't see it that way. Actually, Eric thought that a inexpensive musical about golf could make money, especially in licensing, and I was the first guy. I was the first to run. Yeah, it was. Yeah, and Eric does many charitable things. Don't get me wrong. He has a giant heart, but not bad. You know, that he's like, my job was to kind of do everything I can to deliver a hit show.
I guess I was thinking of patron. I was thinking more of a patron as being somebody who really believes in you and supports you.
Like Tchaikovsky had a patron. So Tchaikovsky and many other Medicis were patrons. You know,
my 50th birthday, I had a I did a benefit for Amos Musical Theater, and Eric provided the Douglas Fairbanks Theater for that occasion, and I could fulfill my lifetime dream. I had my 50th birthday celebrated on the set of The Puppetry of the Penis.
Yeah,
Oh, I so remember that. I so
I do too.
remember that.
I do
Oh
too.
my God.
Yeah.
Um, if anybody in the room has any further questions, do a virtual hand raise. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. Um, I do leave the room open in case you guys want to stay. If people want to actually meet you individually, I can open up breakout rooms. It's up to you.
Sure.
So let's see. What am I going to do
Took me a
here? I'm
long
going
time
to
to stop breaking out. Anyway,
stop, it's breaking out. Okay. So thank you, Michael Roberts.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you,
Thank you.
thank you, Michael Colby. And this is Bob Ost saying thank you all out there. Thank you, everybody in the room, and thank you, everybody out there in YouTube land for stopping by and spending some time with us. If you find what we do interesting, if you want to be part of the conversations and you would like to be in the room, I can make that happen. And I will, let's see, let me see. It's a lot of noise. Okay, I will invite you if you just email me TRUNLTD. That's TRUNLTD at AOL.com. Just send me an email and we'll put you on the Zoom list. And you'll meet Sam Simons and his wife next week. You'll meet producer Don France in 2 weeks and Bob Cuccioli in March. We got lots of people coming on talking. So do be a part of it. This started off as a community service. It really was a community service. It shut down just made it impossible to run my company in any way that I was used to. So I had to create this room and have people come here every week, and it's been kind of amazing because we've actually become global, where we used to be just a New York centric organization. We now have people coming in from all over the world. Today we had somebody from Australia. Thank you, Karen Cohen, for being with us. If you want to support what we do, um, you can come for free. You're always welcome to come for free. But if you want to pay a little something, that helps us. If you want to join as a true member, that helps us even more. And if you want to give us a donation, don't let me stop you. Our email is trudonate.com, trudonate.com. So you can give us whatever's in your heart. Um, whatever's in your heart that happens to be also in your wallet. So that's it for this week, and I hope to see everybody next week. Thank you all.